Hi guys, it's Fightsci here with yet another video. Today we are going to be discussing one of the best super bantamweights ever, Guillermo Jackal Rigondeaux. Now before we delve, straight into the whole Guillermo Rigondeaux style breakdown, I feel like it's important to mention a few things, mainly about Cuban fighters. Cuba has an elite amateur program, elite amateur boxing program, elite wrestling program. We usually don't see that many of them in the pros, professional boxing and what have you. Basically, the reason for that is because of communism in Cuba. We thank Fidel Castro for that, basically. Because of communism in Cuba is the reason why we don't see as many of them in the professionals. Now, this isn't a political video, so I don't want to delve too deep into it. Not to mention, I don't want to, get shot by some Cuban spies. But it is basically because of the Iron Curtain in Cuba. They basically, the money that Cuban fighters bring back from Cuba basically the money that Cuban fighters bring back from the Olympics with like gold medals is basically the reason why you almost never see them turn pro. Also, the basic gist with Cuban fighters is that they're basically American fighters, but with better footwork even. Obviously, for the most part, Americans are better than Cubans, but Cubans would be kind of a force to be reckoned with if more of them could turn pro. They would really be some shit, bro. Because you get, Cubans that are, smaller. You get Cubans that are bigger. I wouldn't say they'd be ruling every division. Obviously American fighters and I believe, Soviet fighters, fighters from normally Soviet countries are the best fighters in today's day and age. I mean, once the Soviets, Iron Curtain fell, and in, the 2000s to the 2020s, you really see a lot of fucking great Soviet fighters in MMA and boxing. Some of them being, Artur Beterbiev, someone I've already done fighter breakdown on, Dmitry Bivol, Vasily Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk, and the Klitschko brothers being the main ones. But without further ado, let's get into the Guillermo Rigondeaux fighter. Sidebar, just looking at Guillermo Rigondeaux's kind of amateur pedigree now, it is really impressive. I will go over all of them except for his Cuban championship accolades, because there's literally too many of them. He has at least fucking a dozen of them. And obviously, aside from Soviet Russia, Cuba, places like Cuba, Brazil, shit like that, obviously have the best amateur programs other than the US. But probably better than the US. Let's just be honest. But let's go down the list. So just going down his resume, it's actually even more impressive than I thought. So to start, he was in the Olympic Games in 2000 and 2004. He was in the World Championships, which is fighting boxers from all around the world. Other than the Olympics, the second most prestigious amateur tournament. In the World Cup, he won gold 3 different years, 2002, 2005, and 2006, one of them being in Moscow. In the Pan American Games, he won gold in Santo Domingo. In 2006, in the Central American and Caribbean Games, he won gold in Cartagena. And the Cuban Championships, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The guy literally won. And the Cubans, like I said, have an elite amateur program. So, all in all, this guy won gold at least 10, 15 times. And his final record as an amateur was 374-12. Now, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I would honestly say, and I love Lomachenko, Lomachenko is easily one of the best featherweights and junior lightweights of the past 30 years. Top 10 in both of those divisions. Just strictly talking about the past 30 years. But if we're being honest, Guillermo might have him beat as an amateur. He probably has him beat as an amateur. I didn't even know all those. I knew he was a two-time gold medalist, but I didn't even know he had all those accolades. Now, obviously, Lomachenko is better as a pro, as shown by... And I don't want to make this all about Lomachenko and Guillermo, because there's more to him than just the Lomachenko fight. But obviously, Lomachenko is better as a pro, obviously being one of the best fighters this generation. Like, one of the best fighters of the 2010s. Just behind Pacquiao and Mayweather. I would honestly put him above guys like Andre Ward and Canelo, even though those guys are good. I would honestly, if you look at Loma's resume and really know what you're looking at, I would say Loma's better. But Guillermo has him beat as an amateur for sure. Other than Guillermo's amateur pedigree, he has a lot as a pro. 2-division champ, unified and lineal champ at super bantamweight, 122 pounds. I believe the WBA champ at 118 pounds. And he beat future Hall of Famer and 4-division champ in Nonito Donaire, and faced future Hall of Famer Lomachenko in kind of a controversial fight, kind of where Lomachenko got his name Nomaschenko from the fact that he made Guillermo Rigondeaux quit on his stool. Again, don't want to make this all about Lomachenko, but I feel like it has to be mentioned when talking about Rigondeaux. Now that we got that out of the way, now time for the official break. Now, in my opinion, Guillermo Rigondeaux has some of the best footwork professional boxing has ever seen. He will frequently use sideways shifts into a pivot to get to the center of the ring and control centering. And one thing I do notice about Cuban-style footwork is almost like they're dancing. Rigo's defense is also very interesting. He kind of uses a Philly shell, kind of like Mayweather. I'm not really going to explain what a Philly shell is. I'm going to use an example on screen of Mayweather, probably the best Philly shell user, and, you know, a guy that uses the Philly shell that's closest in size to Rigo. But basically, Rigo uses a Philly shell similar to Floyd Mayweather, but he adds zone twist. He uses L blocks, which is basically blocking, like putting your forearm up and blocking punches with your forearm. Probably the most unique thing about Rigo, though, is I would say some people describe it as shadow boxing mid-fight. What do I mean by this? So basically, what it is he will probe shots, like kind of looks like he's shadow boxing, almost like rehearsing punches, which basically what this does is it tightens up the guard on his opponent. He basically tightens up the guard on his opponent for him to wrap hooks around the guard. And what it also does is loads up the opposite hand from the one he's throwing. So let's say he's throwing his lead hand, the right hand. He can probe a shot, throw a left hand as a probing shot, throw the right hand one more time, and by this time, the opponent would have already tightened up their guard, leaving openings for Rigo to wrap punches to their body and hook around their guard. Rigo also has a very nuanced lead hand. He can throw it as a jab, he can probe with it, he can use it to judge distance, he can use it to create openings, he can use it to break rhythm, create rhythm, etc., etc. Final thoughts. Guillermo may never get the recognition he deserves. Easily the best Cuban professional ever and second best Cuban fighter ever other than amateur legend Teofilo Stevenson. Rigo not only has some of the best footwork boxing has ever seen, but also is one of the most avoided fighters of this generation. After dismantling and practically toying with future Hall of Famer Nonito Donaire, no one else at his division wanted to fight him. Unfortunately, he will probably always be remembered for the Lomachenko fight, just as much as if not more than the Nonito Donaire fight. But make no mistake, Rigondeaux is one of the best lighter weight fighters of this generation and no doubt has a case for Hall of Fame. This is Fightsci signing out.